Hi guys, my name's Seb Tudor, I'm the man on the Silver Mountain, and welcome back. Now today I want to talk about loot crates. Why? Because of course everything's blown up about it at the moment, and this is a topic that I was considering putting into the month in review at the end of this month. Same with the Harvey Weinstein story that I covered yesterday. And I was considering putting all of this into the month in review, but I figured there were other more important things to talk about that are more wide-reaching, and more kind of behind the scenes. And so I wanted to talk about this now because if you hadn't noticed, I enjoy my games, especially my online games. And so, like the monetization of those games, where you've got things like microtransaction stores and kind of loot boxes and all that kind of stuff. Not only does it impact me, but it's one of those things that bothers me. And I've done a couple of videos in regards to paladins and the way that they're dealing with this. And so as a result, I want to talk about kind of what's been going on and what's been happening. I want to talk about the games that have been and the studios that have been accused of doing this really, really badly. And then I want to go and talk on kind of like the games that I feel have been doing it well, but then also where I feel the lines are drawn, because I feel like those are two slightly different things. But first off, so why has this been blowing up? And it's because, again, we're seeing more and more games coming out more recently, especially single player games that are the ones that people have directed their ire towards, that have loot crates and like additional buy more through random systems kind of stuff. And this is a little bit of a problem because often some of these games are like aimed at people. They're not mature rated games. They're aimed at kids. They're aimed at teens. People who want more, and they're going to consume more because that's a cool thing, and they don't have the presence of mind, necessarily the impulse control, not to just try and jump for it. We've seen the kids that have spent $50,000 on their parents' credit cards through their like Candy Crush or Clash of Clans or whatever else on mobile. Just because they've been hitting the button because it says, oh, well, you need to speed up the development and building of this thing. Go and press oh, you need more lives to continue, please. And so they just keep pressing the button because they're not really aware of the value of money and whatever else. And I'm not a big fan of money as a system anyway, to one degree or another, but it's important. It's the way that we handle ourselves in the world for the time being. So it's important to have that appreciation of what money's value is, and kids don't have that. So aiming what is almost, I wouldn't say it's always gambling. Sometimes it's gambling, but for example, some of the various kind of loot boxes and things, especially for things like Counter-Strike, where you get the skins, some of which are worth thousands of dollars if you go onto those various lotto and trading sites and things like that. And though, so a lot of the time you will get something that isn't worth all that much, and sometimes for the amount that you've put in, you'll get something that's worth a lot, and it is kind of gambling. But one of the legal kind of situations around it is that it's not gambling because you never lose completely. You always get something, and that's a dodgy thing to look at in my view, because that would suggest that things like the National Lottery isn't gambling if you've managed to get £10 out of it every so many times for the amount of money that you put in. No, it doesn't matter what you get. If you're gambling, then you're gambling. Yeah, you can still have a more minor win within a gambling setting. Yeah, just because you don't hit the jackpot every time, you will still have something come back to you in some way at some point, depending on how much you put in. And so I wouldn't, I would agree with the people that for the most part have said, yeah, this is a form of gambling because you're throwing money in and you're hoping for something, and it's a random chance, and then you potentially get it. Yeah, and some places have taken steps towards it being less random, but for the most part, it's still a case of, well, you might want a thing, but there's a good chance you won't get it. And so the people that have been going, oh yeah, this is basically a form of gambling. That's where we now see, as in the UK especially, we've been seeing calls to the government to regulate this, considering that it is targeting kids a lot of the time. And we've been seeing as well in the last few days stuff from Activision with patents that they made, I think it was 2014, 2015, in regards to matchmaking systems that promote the sale of product, which again probably wouldn't work on someone who's older and more aware of what's going on and has better impulse control, but especially to like a 15-year-old kid playing something like, I don't know, a random shooter online or something like that. They're gonna be swept up in that system, and it's going to be able to take advantage of them. It's horrible, and it's manipulative, and it's bleeding young people, like kids, for the greed of old men, and it's such a horrible idea. So which games have done this really badly? Well, the ones that stand out to me as doing it very badly are either the ones where you've got the pay to win kind of model, where you come in and you buy the loot boxes, and then the random kind of allocation of stuff is either you win kind of big through the loot boxes, where every loot box is going to give you something that will give you an edge over someone that hasn't paid, or it's a case of you've kind of jumped in, you've already paid $60 for the game, and then like you get to a point and it's the loot boxes that need to continue. You know, and that's a tricky situation in and of itself. So let's break this down into where, let's go for the divisions that I feel that there are first. Because for free-to-play games, microtransactions are the way that they survive. Yeah? For free-to-play games, microtransactions have to be a thing. It's part of the model, it's part of the way that they work. And it's a take it or leave it a lot of the time. In some instances it's not, and that's where things go badly. But for instance, in, I don't know, in Neverwinter, you pick up a whole load of boxes and it's the keys that you pay for. Yeah? Why? Because that's one of the ways that they can suggest to players that, you know, buying these things, they'll get some nice cosmetic stuff, they'll get some other little bits of kind of utility stuff, and so you won't really get anything that's stand out, going to make you so much stronger, so much better than anybody else, but you've supported the game through like just buying those keys. That to me seems reasonably, you know, that's fairly reasonable. A game that I feel has done it very well is Warframe, where they don't have loot boxes. There's a lot of RNG in the game itself, a lot of grind and farming and whatever else, but there's there aren't any loot boxes. It's the simple, if you have money but you don't have time, buy the thing from the in-game store. It won't make you any stronger than anyone else. It won't give you anything else that's particularly special, but it means that you will gain something in less time. The other stuff that's on there is all cosmetic. So it's a case of either play the game if you can play the game, or give us some money to support the game and it'll be as if you played the game. That to me seems reasonably fair, because it's either you're promoting their numbers and building up their numbers to kind of work with their shareholders and work with their investors and publisher and whoever else, to justify why they should be gaining more money from them to let the game grow by going, well, we've got so many millions of people actively playing the game. Or you're going, well, I can't actively play the game all the time, but I can contribute a couple of quid here and there for something that looks cool, and as a result, you know, through giving them money, you're supporting the game and helping it grow. Now, the next kind of division is where I start to have problems, and this is with games like Overwatch or Um, Even arguably Paladins, even though Paladins is free to play, and it's the way that it's done. So let's go for Overwatch first, because this is a game that you buy, and potentially you've spent $40-$60 on this game. You go in, you gain access to all the game modes, you gain access to all the characters. That's all very well and good, but then for skins and things like that, you want the loot boxes. And for a while, the loot boxes, there was only one way of getting them, as far as I'm aware. But then they added in the rewards of loot boxes for playing the game, and as a result, I'm more inclined to be, to see that as a reasonable thing. But the one thing that bugs me about it is that it's still a game that you've had to pay for. And so having a game that you have had to pay for, that then you don't have access to everything in the game, that winds me up no end. Yeah? But in regards to an online game that's adding all this new stuff, it's not something I would be happy with necessarily, but it's something that I can understand, because then they're not adding new content in terms of kind of developing the game in big ways, in leaps and bounds every time they release new content. So the new content that they're releasing has to be kind of easily digested, and they need to have this rolling additional income if they want to continue to grow the game. But again, it's still only one price. Each loot box is only costs the same amount as anything else, and that's it. Move on to Paladins. Paladins has a similar system, but you don't have to buy the game, so it's free to play, so we can expect some microtransactions. That's absolutely fine. But the thing is, then, it's as they continue to grow the game, as they develop stuff, then they introduce different systems. And those different systems try to pump either more time into the game or more cash into the game. And that kind of greed is wrong. Going back to another Blizzard title, actually, World of Warcraft, where you've had to buy the game, buy all the expansion packs, pay a monthly subscription, and then you've got the microtransaction store. So you've had to pay for essentially 3 sets of things: the base game and the expansions, which is a substantial amount now considering how many expansions there are, your subscription, which again is a sizable amount of money per year, and then you still don't have access to everything in the game. You still have to then spend more money to get any of those other things from that transaction store, even though you are spending so much money on the rest of the product. And then you've got the last place where we found them, which I feel is just unacceptable on every level, and that is single player games, where you're not in competition with people. You're not influenced by other things that are going on, and you are still expected to buy loot boxes. Now, I don't mind the idea of having, for example, Mass Effect 2. Yeah? Didn't have loot boxes, did have packs that you could buy of extra skins. Of extra skins, of other bits and pieces outside of it. DLCs that were actually really good DLCs. And so, having those outside the game where I knew exactly what I was getting and it was adding something substantial to the game, yeah, that sounds good to me. I would put money behind those. Move along to future EA titles. And you're looking at loot boxes being dropped into games instead of actual content. It's quantity over quality. It's, we're going to slow you down and force you to work and pay more money to get through these loot boxes and things, so that the loot boxes, the skins, the little bits and pieces, they're more content, but we're not going to give you anything substantial. And this is where I feel like we're running into the problem now of a lot of games, MMOs like Guild Wars 2, games like Paladins and Overwatch, games like the recent Shadow of Mordor 2 with loot boxes in. stuff like that, where across all of these different games, it's laziness. It's adding a quantity of things for players to invest in, work towards, pay money for, instead of an actual substantial addition to the game that they can want to sink time in. It, to me, shows a lack of confidence in your product, where you have to add all of these other manipulative, tangential, Skinner box focused methods by which to either drain money from people or drain time from people. You have to throw all of those in because you've got no confidence that people will actually want to come back and play your game. You know, this is one of the things that drives me nuts about games. I want to come and play certain games. Yeah? They're either games that I'm very heavily invested in, that I love very much, or games that I'm really excited for. And so the more transparency there is, the more interesting stuff that they show me, the more that they actually talk to me about stuff, the more that I actually see evidence of like all of it coming to fruition through the game, and not just them throwing random bits and pieces at me in a microtransaction store. That's what makes me go, yes, I'm playing this game and it's awesome and I want to play more. You know, I go on long gaps at times for certain games because the actual content that they add so sporadically, because the rest of the content they've added this year is all microtransaction store cosmetics and things like that. One of the games that I played so much and that I enjoyed very, very much, one of the best game MMOs especially to date that I can recall, was Champions Online, with its really good freeform skill system and its expansive world, the free add-on that they brought in, which was almost the same size as one of the main maps, Millennium City map by itself. You know, they had so much go into that game, and yet then it started to kind of slow down. And it slowed down so that it became Skinner boxes, it became grinding, it became the only thing that they added were costume pieces to the microtransaction store. And the game died. Why did the game die? Why did it all slow down? Well, simple, because the quality that people had been appreciating up until that point disappeared. There were no new kind of adventures to go on, no new things to do, no new kind of power sets and things to invest in after a point. It was all just costume pieces. It was all just make yourself look prettier, which for some people worked perfectly well, but for an awful lot of people like myself, the game just started to die out for us. And so we ended up not hanging around, not putting more money into the game, not putting more of our time into the game even. Going back every once in a while to show a friend that these were the good parts of the game and these are the parts that didn't, hoping that they'll enjoy it as well, so that you can at least play through that first part of the game from beginning to end, so that you can kind of relive it. And that's the sad part, because in most games that do well, that don't mistreat their players like this, you don't have that nostalgic, oh, well, we'll go back and we'll play through it when it was good. We'll play through the parts from when it was good. Because in games that treat their players properly, that don't try and just drain money out of them, and all that kind of thing, you go back and every time you go back, it's either, wow, this has got better, or, yeah, this is the game that I love. You know, going back to Warframe more recently with the Plains of Eidolon update, you know, I've gone back and I've been willing to sink time back into that game. You know, before I was kind of coming in doing a little bit of farming here and there to get this thing or that thing. I was playing with my brother and stuff like that every so often. I was doing the quests with you guys to one degree or another, to kind of highlight where this is a great game, but they've not necessarily done everything that they could with it, and these are the places where I would love to see it improve, and here are the parts that I really enjoyed. You know, and here's the story that they're telling as well, because that's a very important thing to me personally. And those things all stood out. And now that it's just like, here, we're a whole load of new content. No extra costs beyond the costs that we've already basically asked you for, which is either time or money. And, we're going to throw a whole load of new things into the microtransaction store. But again, if you've got time to get them through the game, get them through the game. If you don't, then don't. Work with us whichever way you want to work with us. You're one of our community. Here's the thing that we wanted to share with you, which is awesome. Yeah? That's the mindset that I wish more of these developers had and more of these publishers had. Because if you make think about the number of TV shows that got cancelled. Firefly, absolutely amazing TV show, got cancelled after half a season because they didn't feel it was getting the numbers. Now cult classic and had a movie like picked up after it, and people are still considering whether or not they want to pick it up again and maybe try and get Joss Whedon on behind it as well again to make it a success once more with a different story. It's they're not the people who are in the positions, people at Activision using this or looking to develop and patent this manipulative kind of crappy technology to matchmake to promote sales, or the people that have been EA dropping and arguably Ubisoft as well, because I believe the new Assassin's Creed Origins has loot boxes in it also. Dropping all of those things into single player games just so that you're milking more money out of people. I mean, really? These people haven't learned, and they don't have patience, and it's what's causing a real problem in the game industry at the moment. And considering how big the game industry is, that's causing such a problem for so many people. Because the game industry is huge. So much more money in it than so many other entertainment industries. And yet, it's still a very small number of people that are actually working in the game industry. And yet, the people who involve themselves in the game industry, from me making videos, from other people making videos, from people playing the games, generating communities around it, the kind of reach of the industry is colossal, and there's something for everybody there. And so having these things in place and not looking at quality and only working on quantity, it's bizarre and ridiculous, and it's only ever causing us more and more problems and more pain. Which again is why I'm personally hoping that at least in the UK it's found that games with loot boxes and games with those kind of monetization models have to be better regulated, because we shouldn't be seeing stuff in, for instance, again, Paladin's one that I've complained about already in another video with their cash store and the way that works, as well as then the addition of the VIP system, which is basically the cash store but for more. You shouldn't be getting people to pay so much more money and put so much more time into it when you've already got that kind of system in place, when the stuff in the cash shop is exactly the same as the stuff in the VIP store, in terms of quality, in terms of standards, in terms of what the items actually are. Then you shouldn't be able to charge substantially more or put more behind those paywalls and time walls. So I'm hoping something comes of that legally and in terms of regulation, so that then we can see this getting phased out again. Because I remember when you bought a game and you had 60 hours of gameplay just right there, just straight, no loot boxes, no microtransaction stores, just this flat game. And then if you wanted more, you bought an expansion pack, and that was like 20 quid, and then you would just roll that straight into the game, and you would have another 30-40 hours. I remember, in fact, one of the most successful game series of all time, one of the best regarded at any rate, Half-Life 2. You bought that game. You had 10 hours of play, but it was such high quality. You bought the next couple. I could complete all three, like Half-Life 2 as well as Half-Life 2 Episode 1 and Episode 2. I could complete all of those within a day. Sit down, run through it. Maybe I'll do that at some point. Who knows? But like, there's some quantity to it, but there's no loot boxes, there's no grinding, there's no anything like that. It's just you get in, you play. There's no faff, no worry about anything else. You just get in, you play. Yeah? And even though it's short, a relatively short experience, even though it's not expansive, the maps are all fairly linear, the enemies are essentially quite repetitive, and stuff like that, it's still one of the most loved games. People are still crying out for either Half-Life 2 Episode 3 or Half-Life 3. And like the way that it's all panning out is, you know, we still have some of those games, but they're dotted in amongst this sea of others that have tiny DLCs that constitute relatively large amounts of money for not very much. Content provided through loot boxes, stuff like that, and it all kind of breaks down, doesn't it? It all kind of melts away into this pot of the good ones just sinking to the bottom under this pile of games that are just there to bring you in, occupy space on your hard drive, occupy you, or so that you sink as much time into it as possible, or sink as much money into it as possible. You know, it's such a problem, and I can understand why it's blown up, because we hate microtransactions, don't we, guys? Like, I'm completely willing to support games that I like, that I love, that I enjoy. And in terms of microtransactions, I'd be willing to do that. But as I've said, I prefer early access, where as long as the game is like set to be sorted and released. I mean, as I said, the only time that I've been burned by that and been disappointed with it, especially really, was with EverQuest Next, because they were planning out some amazing stuff, and then they got cancelled. Even I'd put money towards it in terms of a founders pack, because I was like, well, it's EverQuest. Who's going to cancel EverQuest? EverQuest 1 was huge. EverQuest 2 was also massive and went on for a very long time before other more modern MMOs started taking over from it. You know, we've had tangential EverQuest stuff for years. You know, it's a Evercrack, it's a Titan. What, you know, people are really excited about EverQuest Next. Why would they cancel it? You know, and yet that's the way it went. But when you've got other games where it's like, well, if it's going onto Steam, then that's usually a good indication that the game's probably going to get finished off. Yeah? That there's enough of a game there that Steam has been able to go, okay, fair enough, it's been either voted through, there's enough money behind it, they've got enough of a thing to run with, you know, and so as a result, that's been successful. You know, that's where Subnautica came from, that's where Conan Exiles came from. You know, that's where an awful lot of games have come from these days. And so, you know, there's that as a model that I like more. But again, I love my free-to-play games. You know, where I put money into Warframe. Why? Because Warframe was an awesome concept that has now grown into an awesome game. And so, yeah, have I bought stuff in the microtransaction store? Yeah, I have. It's fairly evident from some of the stuff that I've got in my videos that not all of it was stuff that's available to earn. You know, some of the cosmetics on some of my characters and things, some of my Warframes. But did they ever really push me to go and do that? No, something came out and I went, that looks awesome and it suits me, I'm going for it. So where it comes to games that force you to use their microtransaction stores, their loot boxes and things like that, especially when you've already paid for the game in some way, I feel like that's just crappy. And we need more regulation to actually see an end to that, so that we get back to the not necessarily the good old days, but the division between, this is a game that I buy, and I buy the game to get the game, and everything that that entails. This is a free-to-play game where if I play it, I don't lose anything other than some space, some hard drive space for a time on my hard drive on my PC, but otherwise, if I like it, I like it. Great. If I don't, then I can get rid of it. And if I really like it, then I can put some money into it. You know, it's those choices that allow us to decide what we like, what we want, and where quality lies for us that really stands out to me. And this is where games that also go from one thing then to free to play, or from you know, which way, it bugs me. You know, buy to play models I thought were a great idea. But we've seen more corruption and breaking down of buy to play models, with games going from buy to play to free to play to partly free to play to then mistreating the people that had put the money into the game in the first place by buying it and stuff like that. Yes, I'm looking at you, Battleborn. And so as a result, you know, there's that problem as well, but that's a problem maybe for a different time, because we won't be able to see how those kind of models would be affected until things like loot boxes and in-game kind of stores, microtransaction stores, are better regulated and kind of reined in, so that we can see where the lines are drawn. But anyway, guys, I'd love to hear what you guys think about this. Again, this kind of got a bit rambly towards the end there, but I'd love to hear what you guys think about microtransactions, loot boxes, and all this shit. Do you like them? Do you not like them? I'd imagine most of you don't like them. But, you know, I'd love to hear your thoughts. And then again, like, how would you solve this problem? Like, I've said, you know, rein it in, go back to quality over quantity, because that way, if your game has a lot of quantity, if it's all quality, then your game's going to be amazing. You know, Skyrim is a good example of that, where there's a lot of quality content in, and it's quite an expansive game as well. And so as a result, yeah, guess what? It became another classic. As it were, you know, Oblivion before that, almost every Elder Scrolls game, in fact, you know, where it's been expansive, but everything that you've come across has been of a reasonable, at least reasonable quality. Even the glitches and things that then get turned into memes. You know, I would imagine that if Bethesda released a game that wasn't buggy, then it would possibly even be lower rated, because it wouldn't have that meme-ish quality behind it all the time. But anyway, as said, I'd love to know what you guys think, and I'll see you in the video tomorrow. Take care. Thank you very much for watching, guys. If you enjoyed this video, then please drop us a like, share this video, and subscribe for more, and I'll see you in the video tomorrow. Take care.